and then full stack developer. Like, how did that help you as a PM?
I would say, so I'm kind of blessed with the fact that Redfin doesn't hire people for technical ability, even though I have the technical background, because I've been able to, I would say, have a more unbiased view of what technical aptitude actually means, because I wasn't like put through this process that made me believe that I needed it. So because I didn't come into this convinced that I needed it, I think my eye was more open to seeing the ways in which I actually might not, but also being realistic about the ways in which I do. So I'd say, first and foremost, I'd say confidence, right? Because I think there's a lot of rhetoric out there of people saying like, oh, well, you have to be technical to be a PM, and like, oh, like you don't have a computer science degree. Like, how does it feel to be like a non-major PM? And I always get confused when I hear that, because there isn't a product management major. So I'm not exactly sure what major people are referring to. But I would say just having the confidence to be like, well, I have my background in design, I have my background in engineering, and like that allowed me to feel better about trying to become a product manager, so that like people's commentary about what I needed to get together or what I don't have didn't bring me down because it wasn't as relevant. So I'd say that's the first like way that I can think of off the top of my head it helped the most. But also in terms of what I just said, like, you're not the engineer. You should leverage your engineers who are really good at their job. But it helps to communicate with these people in a way that it's like, I know what you're saying, and you don't have to break it down for me. Like, it saves time in terms of the conversation, but it's also just like, people have a bias towards people like themselves. And I would not be surprised if engineers have a bias towards PMs that understand engineering. They're like, oh, I like this person. Like, I love our conversations. And I'm sure that that influences the relationship and makes it better. So it helps with the communication. Again, don't really think it's required, but I think human bias in this process makes it helpful. And then lastly, I'd say the ways in which it might actually be somewhat required, because I don't expect PMs to be coding. If you're at a company where that's the case, I'd say this is a different conversation. But if you're a company like mine where we have our engineers and their job is engineering and my job is the product management and those are separate, I would say it helps to like kind of call BS on engineers if you have an engineering background yourself, because an engineer will be like, well, I can't do this because it's too hard. I'm like, okay, so explain why it's too hard. And then they'll actually talk about the implementation. I'm like, but that's possible. Like, I know how to do that. So I know you know how to do that. So I think that that's how I've seen it play out, where like actually having the technical knowledge was like necessary for a negotiation that I was having in terms of talking about the way we were planning out the development for a project. But other than that, I haven't seen it be super critical. I've just seen it be helpful. And I would say a lot of people are inflating helpful with critical. And something that one of my coworkers said to me that I really appreciate is like, just because something's hard doesn't mean you can't do it. So just because it's harder to be a PM without like a extensive technical background while you're working with very technical products, it does not mean it's impossible, and that shouldn't discourage you from trying just because you don't have that background.